I said I would scatter them into the corners of the earth. I will make the remembrance of them to cease from amongst men. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 26. Today we're going to be discussing the relations between Black people and the Jews of the Bible. In most recent times, Black people have become more vocal about being the Jews of the Bible. But if we're being truthful, Black people have claimed to be a lot of things in the past, such as the Egyptians as well as the Native American Indians. So this has led to people not taking these claims serious, as well as some who laugh about it, and there's also those who are upset about it. When they hear Black people claiming to be Jews, they feel as though we are trying to steal another people's heritage. Even I'll admit that I once was on the fence about it. At the end of the day, it all comes down to proof and having evidence to back up these claims. Now, before we make the connections, I first want to point out a couple things. One, the claim of Black people being Jews is not a new ideology. Second, Black people are not the only ones to have made this claim. In fact, a white man by the name of Allen H. Godby had suggested it in 1930. In his book called The Lost Tribes of Myth, he is quoted saying Judaism among American Negroes is to be considered. And the reason he made this connection is he discovered that there was numerous amounts of Jews who had settled in Africa before the transatlantic slave trade. Mr. Gabi would not be the last to make this claim, as in present times there are clips of Ashkenazi Jews doubling down on the notion that there are still tribes in Africa who maintain that they are Jews.
You have a huge community in Africa that they know in tradition that they are Hebrews, that they are from child of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. They know it for sure. You have communities that are running services and prayers by the halakha, keeping Shabbat and eating kosher. They know their roots. Like, you can't argue with them. They're stronger than you. They will tell you who they are. They don't ask you even. And they have the Bible and it's all written over there, and they don't have no problems in life. Except of that we're not able to accept them, to recognize the godliness of the holy tribes that is treasured inside them, their souls.
So from the past up into present times, you can see that it has been non-Black people making the connections that there are Black Jews in Africa, a place in which majority of Black people were brought out of. But in recent times, when Black Americans have also made the claims that they are Jews, they were met with a lot of flack and pushback.
The claims of anti-Semitism and who are the original chosen people of God, and we go into these religious conversations and it's a big no-no.
In 2020, when Kyrie shared a movie about there being more Jews in the world who are Black than what people think, they tried to cancel him for it, and they even suspended him from the NBA. They claimed he was anti-Semitic, and they also canceled his shoe endorsement. This was the same case for another notable Black American man named Kanye West.
And it's just, I want to prove, first of all, I am Jew also. The 12 lost tribes of Hebrew. Do the math. Do your research on it. We have got our culture ripped from us and then told we were just simply void of color, which is another definition for Black. But if we knew we were a culture and knew we were a people, the way the Jewish people know, then we wouldn't abort ourselves. We wouldn't shoot each other dead in the streets and then rap about it. We wouldn't brag about, having sex with each other's wives. We would keep our families together and we would do business together.
Now, I do not endorse everything that Kanye does. We are well aware that in past times he has done and said a lot of crazy things. And for the most part, that has not changed about him. But out of all the offensive things that he might have done, who would have thought that he would get canceled for simply making the claim that Black people are actually Jews?
All right, so who the Israelites, brother?
The Black people.
Now,
You just said it.
so-called Black.
Yeah, you just said it.
Lastly, that brings us to Cat Williams. In the recent clip, he just admitted that Black people are Israelites. And on the viral Joe Rogan podcast, he also said Black people are not mentioned in the Bible as much as they should be. Ever since Cat Williams got into the industry, he made it known that he would never compromise his integrity. He has always been very vocal about his beliefs, And in the viral 2024 interview with Shannon Sharp, he admitted that he was blackballed from the industry for standing on these same beliefs.
300 years ago, we were in slavery by your kind. They took our cooking, they took our culture, and they made it their own. The United States put out the COVID-19 to be able to actually kill and control population. We are the children of Israelites, so they can't kill us black folks. They're trying to.
So not only is it the most notable members of the black community making these claims, but it is also everyday people making these claims. So are they all misinformed? Or is there a connection that we can make between black people and the Jews of the Bible? Unfortunately, this has been made difficult to trace back who we are because unlike every other people group who can trace back their lineage and history thousands of years ago, our roots has been cut off due to the captives who brought us to America on ships. They gave us new names, they made us speak a foreign language, and they also cut off whatever connections we might have had in our previous homes. So the erasure of our history started as soon as we left the point of no return. And once brought to America, our captives did not want us to know who we were in our past life. From the very beginning, the religion, the history, and even the science they taught us were based on lies and prejudice. And these false beliefs in white superiority is what encouraged the genocide and ethnic cleansing of human beings all around the world. It was after the Dark Ages that white people, aka Gentiles, made history all about them. This began in the Renaissance era when white people began painting pictures of God, the holy angels, as well as Adam and Eve, and Jesus as being depicted as white people. This psychological effect led them to believe that they were superior to all other races. So it was during this time period, the 15th century, that they will begin to refer to all non-white people as savages, barbarians, and even monkeys. So by the time black people were brought under their possession, this is when they began to push these false narratives onto us. In America, it is often referred to as being beasts, monkeys, or apes. These false narratives was even pushed in the entertainment world with movie flicks such as King Kong. The true meaning behind his name, King Kong, is that he was the king of the Congo people. Congo is a real place in Africa where many black people were also brought from during the transatlantic slave trade. Now, obviously, the movie was made to be fiction, but the ideal that they thought of to come up with this movie was based on the stereotypes of black people in those times. And similar to Kong being brought over to America as an exhibition, in real life, white America was using black people to be exhibitions in their circus acts. Most notably, the Moose Brothers, who were born albino but still black. These brothers were showcased as freaks of nature as well as astonishments to the white public during circus acts. These racist displays was not just in America, but also in Europe, where they had black people in human zoos who were being observed as some sort of astonishment to white people who viewed them less as being a human and more like an animal. The photo that's being shown here can still be found on the internet with a white woman feeding a little black girl a banana as if she was truly a monkey. And this mentality hasn't changed even in our modern times. You recently had a white woman who I believe was modeling for Gucci wearing something that appeared to be from the Black Sambo, which was a racial cartoon back in the days. So all the racist stereotypes of the past shaped the future of the world. White supremacists from both Europe and America use pseudoscience to justify racism as well as to prove white superiority. Now, as of today, we all know that these things were based off of lies, as we have been given the opportunity to prove ourselves. But only 50 to 60 years ago, this was a real stigma that people believed in America. Had black people not fought to be viewed as humans in the eyes of white people, they probably will still view us as they did in the past. Now, if we had to fight so hard just to be seen as humans in this society, do you think they would want us to know that we are the descendants of the Jews in the Bible? The entire purpose of the Willie Lynch theory was to prevent black people from discovering who they truly are. If it had ever came out to light that black people were truly the chosen people of the Most High, This would have been problematic to white slave owners who viewed themselves as superior to black people. So the main objective of the Willie Lynch theory was to condition black people to think lesser of themselves. That way, if they were ever to be set free, in which we were, they had hoped that the mental conditioning would make us want to cling back under our oppressors for guidance. And in doing so, this has complicated things for black people when it comes to rediscovering who they truly are as a people. So with our heritage being stripped away from us, as well as the conditioning to think lesser of ourselves, we have become molded by America into what we have become today. It's similar to cultural assimilation, which occurs when an ethnic minority sacrifices its own culture to integrate into a society. But unlike other ethnic groups, this was something that we didn't have a choice in, but it was forced upon us as descendants of slaves. And with the Civil Rights Acts in the 60s being passed, allowing black people to integrate into white society, we have to take all of this into consideration when it comes to identifying who we truly are. This is why over the years we have allowed them to call us Negroes, blacks, colored people, as well as African American. And while we have gave meanings to these names that they have called us, these terms do not really define who we are as a people. And those who have broke out of this mental bondage are beginning to realize that this is true. We once had our own names, our own customs, and our own heritage before we were brought to America. So I'm saying all of this before I even start making the connections that we are descendants of Jews, so it doesn't sound like a foreign concept because of the mental conditioning that they have placed us under, such as believing that Jesus, who is a Jew, was a white man, as well as believing that the religion of the Bible is a white man's religion. We have to remember that Christianity was originally the faith of the Hebrews, and the home of these Hebrews was located in Northeast Africa. So it's important we separate the truth from the lies, and I believe this is what our Black history leaders did in the past. When we talk about Nat Turner, Frederick Douglass, as well as Harriet Tubman, the one thing they had in common was they believed in the God of the Bible. So in fact, you could say the Bible played a major role in black people being set free out of the chains of slavery. This is the one thing that they all had in common. They had no recollection of our history, but what they feel most connected to was the Bible, and it's probably due to the Hebrews having gone through exactly what we were going through, and that is slavery. And them being allowed to read the Bibles for themselves, they was finally able to see that it had nothing in common with the lies that the white oppressors was telling them. So if you was to ask Frederick Douglass why does he believe in the so-called white man's religion, here's what he would say in his own words. Quote, "I love the pure, peaceable, and impartial Christianity of Christ. I therefore hate the corrupt, slave-holding, women-whipping, cattle-plundering, partial, and hypocritical Christianity of this land. Indeed, I can see no reason but the most deceitful one for the calling the religion of this land Christianity. I look upon it as the climax of all misnomers, the boldest of all frauds, and the grossest of all libels." End of quote, by none other than Frederick Douglass himself. So as you can see, he was able to separate the truth from the lies being told. The Christianity of the Bible compared to the hypocritical Christianity of this land. Nat Turner, as well as Harriet Tubman, was also able to divide the truth from the lies.
And on the 12th of May, 1828, I heard a loud noise in the heavens, and the Spirit instantly appeared to me and said that the serpent was loosened, and that Christ had laid down the yoke he had borne for the sins of men, and that I should take it on and fight against the serpent. For the time was fast approaching when the first should be last, and the last should be first.
Do not find yourself mistaken now.
Was not Christ crucified?
God's time is always near. He set the North Star in the heavens. He gave me the strength in my limbs. He meant I should be free.
So as you can see, our black history leaders, at least the ones who paved the way for us to be free out of those chains, they all had a spiritual connection with the God of the Bible. This is what inspired them to do what they did. And in fact, even Harriet Tubman's nickname was called Moses. And even in a general sense, I believe our ancestors had always been a spiritual people. I even believe they knew about the God of the Bible way before European contact, and I'll explain why shortly. When slavery kicked off in America, they came up with a thing called slave codes. This meant black slaves couldn't vote, own firearms, own land. They weren't allowed to gather in large groups. It was required for them to have a curfew, and it was also illegal for them to read or write. Now, it's important to know that these black slaves were imported from Africa, where they had their own language that they could read and write in. So it was only illegal for them to learn how to read and write in the English language that their oppressors spoke in. They also probably feared that these black slaves would be able to read the Bibles for themselves to see how hypocritical these slave owners was, which was inevitably to come anyway, as we heard Frederick Douglass give his testimony of the hypocrisy of this nation claiming to be Christian. Now, just because these Negro slaves weren't allowed to learn how to read or write in English, this didn't stop them from speaking in their own language and even singing in their own language. So it was known for slaves to sing Negro spiritual songs such as Kumbaya. Slaves who were brought from West Africa was known to sing this song in South Carolina and Georgia. Kumbaya is said to mean come by here in English, but I will tell you the real spiritual meaning behind these words. The name of the God of the Bible in Hebrew is originally called Yahuwah. The short form of this name is called Yah, which is where we get the phrase hallelujah from, which means praise be to Yah. Also, every prophet mentioned in the Bible had the short form of God's name mentioned in their own names originally in Hebrew, including the Messiah, Yashua, before they was given their new names pronounced in English. See, the letter J didn't exist until the 15th century, so the term Jew, which is derived from Hebrew, was originally called Yahuda. This was the original name of Jacob's son, which we now call Judah, which is where the word Jew comes from. But when you pronounce it in Hebrew, you could hear the name of God in it, Yahuwah, Yahuda. So when these black slaves were getting whipped and forced to work long hours on the plantations, they would sing out Kumbaya, which means come by here, Yah. The phrase of this Negro spiritual has nothing to do with the English language at all. So this meant that the slave owners had no idea that their slaves was calling out to their God in Hebrew, Kumbaya, come here, Yah. I also discovered in an article written in 1897 that there was a Negro who can write in Hebrew. This can be found online in the Houston Daily Post. But this is significant evidence that could back up the claims that black people are the descendants of the Jews of the Bible. The article starts off saying, Negro who can write in Hebrew, he is deaf and dumb and comes from an African town. It then goes on to say, a young African Negro has been in this city for the last few days who claims to be a Hebrew. He is deaf and dumb and as black as the ace of spades. He carries a pad of paper with him and answers all questions by writing them in Hebrew and Lashon Kadesh. What excites the most wonder is that he writes in Lashon Kadesh, which is the language of the book of Moses. It is made a special study of, spoken and written with ease only by the rabbis and highly educated Hebrews. So before I continue, I searched up the language of Lashon Kadesh to see what its meaning was, and it says it's a mixture of Hebrew and Aramaic used in prayer books and holy texts read by all Jews. It says the term is also used as a name for the classical Hebrew language in ways that emphasize its ancient, holy aspects rather than its modern incarnations. So basically, this black man from Africa was able to read and write in the original Hebrew language that Moses and the prophets spoke in. And remember, this was in 1897, so this was years before we got the modern day nation of Israel. Continuing on, it says the Negro was sent to one of the rabbis of the Hartford, who is perfectly satisfied that he is a Hebrew, He says that he came from a large town in Africa where there is a tribe of about 20,000 black Hebrews who speak Lachin Kadesh and are quite prosperous. He also says that his father is a rabbi in that town, and that is why his father took the trouble to teach him to write these languages, which needs an extra amount of labor on account of his being deaf and dumb. Now, if you're unaware, there are many Hebrews that was in Africa before the transatlantic slave trade. You can watch my previous videos on that if you're interested. But this specific black man said that there was about 20,000 black Hebrews that was a part of his tribe where he came from. The article goes on to say, he says his people not only write Lachin Kadesh, but it is their speaking language as well. He left home a few years ago and has seen a great deal of the world. In each town, he hunts up the Jewish section, and there they give him clothes, food, and money. What surprises him, he writes, is that no Hebrew knows of his countryman in Africa. And that's the end of the article. So this was not the only case of a black man speaking the Semitic languages. There was also a man named Omar Said who came from West Africa. He was a Muslim scholar who can read, write, and speak in Arabic before he was transferred over to the United States as a slave. But let's see if there's any more historical accounts about black people being able to read and write in the Hebrew language.
This is First African Baptist Church, the oldest black church in North America. The building built by slaves. The gentleman that laid the first brick laid the last. The balcony hold pews that actually were built by slaves. They have the oldest information in this building. That information is written in cursive Hebrew writing. Downstairs, the air holes that the people, when they hid beneath the floors, they were able to use are actually African prayer symbols. This building was built during the night hours. It was also not only used as a place of worship, but it was used as a place to help out on the Underground Railroad. One of the greatest missions I believe ever taken out and carried through was handled beneath the floors of First African Baptist Church. We have the oldest information in this building. That information is written in cursive Hebrew writing.
So in the very first black church in America, the founders of this church had documents that was written in cursive Hebrew writing. But we're barely scratching the surface here. Did you know that in the 16th and 17th century, the Europeans had maps showing the kingdom of Judah on the slave coast, which is where majority of slaves were sold by the millions? So why would there be a kingdom of Judah in West Africa? Remember, the word Jew comes from Judah. So by calling this place the kingdom of Judah, it's insinuating that Jews must have been there. Or why else would Africa have a random kingdom called Judah by the Portuguese? So if there was indeed Jews in the kingdom of Judah located in West Africa, and millions of Africans were brought from this specific place all the way until the 1860s, wouldn't that mean that these were Jews who were being brought to America? Now, if you think that's just a coincidence, there's also an older map from 1492 which shows there being a Gulf of the Jews. So black slaves did not only come from West Africa, but they also came from Central Africa. And this 1492 Portuguese map shows there being a Gulf of the Jews. It says Golfo de Judeo. Now, the first regions to be colonized by Europeans was located in Central Africa, parts of the Congo, as well as Angola. And historically, it is said that there was black Portuguese Jews who settled in these central parts of Africa. So if you look at a map of the transatlantic slave trade, you can see that it was from these regions that majority of black slaves were taken from. The Kingdom of Judah in West Africa, and the Gulf of the Jews in Central Africa. So this is probably why there used to be a village in Manhattan, New York, that was called the Land of the Blacks. It is documented that there was black people living in the lower parts of Manhattan, New York, and they had their own community before they was kicked out of their homes and had everything rebuilt. And if you was to search up the names of these black residents, you will find that they had the last names of Spanish and Portuguese Jews. Now, if you search up the meaning Judah, it means praise. So Judah was the tribe of worshipers and singers. So the millions of black slaves who were brought from the kingdom of Judah in Africa to America, are they known for being worshipers, singers, and dancers? I think we all know the answer to that, as almost every music genre in the United States was invented by black Americans. Gospel, blues, country, doo-wop, swing, jazz, R&B, soul, rock and roll, funk, disco, and hip hop. So evidently, it does appear that black people could be the descendants of Judah, who was a tribe of worshipers, singers, and dancers. And the one thing that black people always had in their music is soul. In Psalm 137, there's a verse about Jews being asked to sing a song while they're under captivity in Babylon. It says, "By the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept, and we remember Zion. There on the poplar trees we hung our harps, for there our captors asked for songs. Our tormentors demanded songs of joy. They said, 'Sing us one of the songs of Zion.' How can we sing the songs of Yahuwah while in a foreign land?" Now, this reminded me of Billie Holiday, who was a famous black musician known for jazz. Her most famous song was called Strange Fruit, which was quite controversial at the time because it talked about black people being hung on poplar trees. It was this song that would make her a target on the FBI's watch list. But before this, white America had no problem with her singing songs of joy, just like this Psalm 137 verse says. And since we're talking about black people being hung on trees, there's actually a Bible verse that talks about anyone being hung on a tree is cursed. It says, "Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, 'Cursed is everyone who is hanged on a tree.'" Galatians chapter 3, verse 13. So if you read the Old Testament, you will see that the Hebrews was eventually placed under this curse of the law due to their disobedience to God and the rejection of his son, Yashua. So this verse says that the only way to be redeemed from this curse of the law is to believe in Yashua, who became a curse for the Hebrews. As it is written, "Cursed is everyone who is hanged from a tree." Yashua was hung from a tree. He was crucified. So black bodies hanging from a tree in America could have been a sign that black people was under the curse of the law mentioned in Deuteronomy chapter 28. Even in chapter 21, verse 22 through 23 in Deuteronomy, it says, "If a man has committed a sin worthy of death, he needs to be put to death and hung on a tree." It then says, "For he that is hung on a tree is accursed of God." So, by the Hebrews being rebellious and rejecting their Savior, it can be said that they had committed a sin that was worthy of death by their God, Yahuwah. So, the only way for them collectively to be redeemed from this curse of the law was for them to return. You see, the more you read the Bible as a black person, you're going to relate to it because you can see the story fits exactly what happened to you. It fits into your history. For example, Joel chapter 3 verse 6, it says the children of Judah and the children of Jerusalem was sold to the Greeks, that you might remove them far from their borders. In the exact same way, black people was also sold to the Greeks, aka white people. They was removed from their homelands, just like the Bible verse is saying about the Jews. So the more you read and start making these connections, you're going to see that these can't just be coincidences. Like on this old slave poster, just read what it says. It says, "To be sold on board the ship." It says, "A choice cargo of about 150 fine, healthy, fine Hebos." That word Hebo actually means Hebrew. So they're saying to be sold 150 fine Hebrews. So, to be the people of the book, not only do you have to be the blood descendants, but you also have to fit the description of what the book is saying about you. and black people fit the description. You see, it says in Deuteronomy 28:15 that all these curses will come upon you if you do not obey the God of your fathers and obey all his laws, statutes, and commandments. So, as a black American, if you was to go through all these curses and read them and compare them to the status of black people today and in past history, you'll be able to make the connection that this is speaking about our people. Even the more specific verses can relate to black people. It says Deuteronomy 28, chapter 49 through 50, Yahuwah will bring a nation against you from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flies, a nation whose language you do not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which does not respect the elderly, nor show favor to the young. This is talking about our history. This is black history. We have the evidence to show that we've gone through this. Watch this clip.
Available in color. The many surviving examples of such postcards tell a horrendous story. They were meant to address the people willing to use the lives of black children to collect a prized commodity, alligator skin. The white hunters were using human blood and flesh to lure monstrous crocodiles and alligators. To prepare for the activity, it is said that some white people kidnapped black children, tied them to a string, and dropped them in the swamps. Others would get groups of children and order them to stay over the alligator swamp, near the open mouths of hungry alligators. These children were fed to the predator's hole. This is a documented event that can also be seen in old artifacts, such as product packaging and knickknacks. Here is a classic example of household ornaments that were sold in areas where alligator baits were deemed a tourist attraction. At the time, the shelves in stores were covered with these decorative objects. These antiques come in bold colors and highly intricate designs that don't shy away from America's brutal past. Many of these trinkets are displayed in the Jim Crow Museum of Racist Imagery.
There's even the curse that mentions the Hebrews serving their enemies while being naked and having a chain of iron being placed upon their necks. There's even the curse that the Hebrews will become an astonishment, a proverb, a byword, which we mentioned in the beginning of this video. We are called Negroes, Blacks, African Americans, which does not define our true identity. Even the prophet Joel talks about the Hebrews losing their heritage. It says in Joel chapter 2, verse 17, that spare your people, Yahuwah, make your heritage not a reproach, a byword among the nations. Why should they say among the people, where is their God? It even says that your sons and daughters will be sold into other people, and there's nothing that you can do about it in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 32. So the point is, nobody on earth fit these descriptions of the curses more than black people. In fact, the Bible says it is by these curses that they will discover who they are. In Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 46, it says, these curses will be a sign and a wonder upon you and your descendants forever. This is why our Black history leaders, such as Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and Nat Turner, had that connection with the Bible. So now that we are discovering that we are the descendants of the Israelites in the Bible, what happens next? What does that mean for us now as a people? We already know about the Bible prophecy that brought us to where we are today, but is there any Bible prophecy about the future of Black people who are in the land of their captivity? There is, but I won't get into it today for the sake of time. But I'll leave you guys with this last verse that speaks about the hope and redemption of God's people. It says, therefore, this is what Yahuwah says. Now I will restore Jacob from captivity, and I will have compassion on the whole house of Israel, and I will be jealous for my holy name. Ezekiel chapter 39, verse 25. Yah bless.